When a young, frugal couple encounters a greedy landlord in their journey to homeownership, they never expected that years later, fate would present a chance for unexpected revenge. Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope your day is an absolutely exceptional day. We're trying a bit of a different format here on KCC today. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. This story comes to us from Rocky Moose. Landlord is jealous of my income, raises my rent $500. I screw him years later for $20,000. In the late 90s, wife and I were just married, just getting started, and we decided to double income no kids it for a few years to save up for a down payment on a house. The dot-com bubble was still rising, and I was a newly minted software developer. I had an entry-level job for a while, and then got recruited to a new city and a new job that paid 3 times what I was making before. It was an offer too good to pass up. I ran the numbers and it was a no-brainer. By living frugally and saving my entire salary, living off of just her income, we could easily have enough in a year to put 20% down payment on a new house. We rented an apartment in the new city that was listed for $950 a month. The landlord was a real estate agent who owned a 2-bedroom condo as an investment property. Let's call him Hank Wazowski. Hank was a thin, gray, no-nonsense guy. He was pleasant enough, but perfunctory, dry, and had no sense of humor. He made a point of explaining that under no circumstances was he responsible for maintaining the garbage disposal, and that it was not included in the rental agreement, and he would not be responsible for fixing it were it to break. Okay. He seemed slightly amused by us, a clueless, young, newlywed couple, but I could tell he wanted to rent to us because we were very obviously a safe choice as renters. We filled out the rental agreement and the credit check, and this is where my troubles began. Hank looked hard at the credit application where I listed my job title, software developer, and my income, $75,000. For a 23-year-old in his second year out of college in the late 1990s, this is a small fortune. Throw in my wife's salary and we were over 6 figures in income, renting an apartment far beneath our means. Like I said, double income, no kids is the way to go when starting out. "I can't believe how much money you make," Hank must have said half a dozen times, muttering under his breath. I explained we were saving to buy a house and that we were only going to stay in the apartment a year. We might stay a few months after the term is over. Would month to month be okay after a year? Hank assured us that would be fine. We saw Hank only once during the year and he again mentioned my salary and how he couldn't believe that's what software developers were making. It was awkward and I gave a vague reply. Anyway, a year later we had found a house to buy, signed all the papers, and were making plans to move. The new house wasn't going to be ready until 2 months after our rental lease was up. So I called Hank to ask if we could, as discussed, simply extend the lease by 2 months before moving out. Hank assured me on the phone it would be no problem, and he would send over an extension for us to sign. The extension arrived in the mail, and it included a month-to-month clause and a $500 increase in the rent. I flipped out and called him. "Hank, why are you increasing the rent over 50%? That's too much. That's more than my new mortgage is going to be." He was super condescending to me. "OP, it's what the apartment goes for now. I would be losing money by renting it for less." I tried to reason with him, but it was very clear he knew we could afford the $500, had no choice in the matter, and he was going to screw us over as best he could. He got angry with me for arguing my point, and I'll never forget his parting words, "You don't have to like it, OP, you just have to pay it." My wife and I tried to figure out a way to move out early by putting our furniture in storage for a couple months and crashing with friends, but it just wasn't going to work out. I swallowed my pride and wrote out the check for $1,450 for the extra month. A month later, I wrote a similar check, and then we moved out. I made sure the apartment was spotless before moving, but still, Hank withheld $300 from our security deposit for BS things that were just a way for him to squeeze a few more dollars from the kids who made too much money. $100 for cleaning? Sure. But $300 was obscene. In my mind, he had screwed me over for $1,200, and there was nothing I could do about it. What made it even more infuriating is that I saw the ad Hank put in the paper after we moved out, and he listed the apartment for rent at only $150 more than we had been paying originally, not the grossly inflated $500 increase. And it didn't rent. A month later, I saw the same ad and he had lowered the price to $75 more than what we had been paying. And I assumed it got rented since the ad stopped appearing. Fast forward about 5 years, life is good, the house is good, we have a baby, and even though the dot-com bubble has burst, I'm still employed. One day, out of the blue, I overhear one of my coworkers, Phil, a senior developer, talking to the guy working the reception desk. "Hey Mike, I'm expecting someone to drop off some paperwork for me. If a Hank Wazowski asks for me, tell him I'll be right out." I freeze and get a taste of bile in my mouth, remembering how I had to write out that name on those checks all those years ago. There's no way it's the same guy, right? I walk over to Phil, who is still by the reception desk. "Phil," I say, "how do you know that name, Hank Wazowski?" Phil explains that Hank is his real estate agent. "I bought my condo through him several years ago. I'm selling my condo now so I can buy a house. So I'm gonna ask him to be my agent again. Do you know him?" I tell Phil that I used to rent an apartment from Hank and describe what he looks like. Phil confirms the description. It's the same guy. Wow, small world, right? And on cue, right then, the front door to the office opens and in walks Hank Wazowski. I stare in disbelief. He's carrying a folder of papers and doesn't recognize me. Phil and Hank shake hands and they talk for a few moments. I stand there silently, wondering what to do. Phil finally says, "Hank, this is my friend OP. I think you may have already met." "Yes, hello Hank. Good to see you again. My wife and I were your tenants a few years ago on so-and-so street. Remember the software developer who rented for a year, saving to buy a house? Well, this is where I work, here with Phil." Hank's eyes indicated he now remembers me, and he's starting to put it all together. We shake hands and he says, yes, of course he remembers, and asks how we're doing. "Oh, we're just fine, thanks for asking. Phil says that you're his real estate agent. Small world, isn't it?" Hank nods pleasantly. He still doesn't remember the details of our last conversation. I do some quick math in my head. This is the early mid-2000s. The real estate market is very strong and easy money for any agent. The crash of 2008 is still a few years in the future. I start to think out loud. Selling the condo for around $150,000 to $200,000, and you're looking at houses in the $500,000 range, so that's $650,000 to $700,000 in total transactions. An agent getting 3% on the sale and the purchase is getting around $20,000 for his trouble. That's a good commission for the agent, isn't it? Hank's eyes flash, and I can tell he remembers everything about me now. Phil is surprised at my passive-aggressive tone. I am enjoying the uncomfortable silence. Hank deflects my question saying, "It's complicated," and tells Phil to send back the papers as soon as it's possible. He shakes hands with Phil, looks at me, nods, and goes to leave. "It was really good to see you again, Hank," I call behind him. He exits the building. As the door is still shutting, I say a bit too loudly so that Hank can hear, "Phil, don't sign anything just yet. I have a story to tell you." Phil looks at me and says, "OP, what the heck was that all about?" He looks pissed and confused at my behavior. I tell Phil the whole story. The rent, the $500 increase, the security deposit. You don't have to like it, you just have to pay it. Everything. "Phil, you can't use this guy to sell your condo and buy a house. I hate him. He's evil. I'll help you find another real estate agent. Just use anyone but Hank." So the great thing about Phil is that, well, he's a great guy. He says he's a little surprised at my story and has always known Hank as a straightforward guy. "But I totally see him doing that to you," he admits. "There's no way I could use him now. What a dick." Then Phil's eyes lit up a bit. "What do you want me to say when I fire him?" I have special feelings for Phil now. We came up with a plan and I made sure there were some key phrases in Phil's repertoire. We planned it all out together in advance. My only regret is that I didn't get to see Hank's reaction in person a day later when Phil made the following phone call while I stood behind him listening. Hi Hank, it's Phil calling. Yeah, about that. I've decided to get some other quotes from other agents. I'm not gonna sign up with you. Pause. No, you shouldn't give a discount. You'd be losing money if you did that. Pause. No, this is just a decision I've made. No, it has nothing to do with OP. Pause. Well, you don't have to like it, Hank. You just have to accept it. Goodbye. Click. And it was the greatest revenge I could have ever imagined. Through a chance meeting years later, Hank got screwed out of $20,000 in easy commissions. And the best part is, Hank absolutely knew it had everything to do with OP. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called 642. It says, "The only question I have is how did you manage to walk around the office with a huge Justice Woody for the rest of the day without offending anyone?" OP responded to this and said, "I stumbled upon this subreddit a few days ago and said Justice Woody has been repopping ever since in anticipation of writing down this story. So glad I got to share it." The comment section on this story was full of people saying that a $500 increase to go month to month was actually reasonable. I can understand that that would be the case in some situations, but in this one here, after OP moved out after getting gouged out of that money, the landlord listed it for only $150 over the previous price. And then they couldn't even get that, so they dropped it down to $75. So that $500 they were asking for, that was a little bit outlandish. Especially since the landlord tried to justify it by saying that was the going rate for the apartment now. Well, we know that definitely wasn't true, considering what they listed it at later. OP, congrats on your new house, congrats on being away from that landlord, and you did a great job helping your friend stay away from that person as well. Because who knows how they were going to try and screw your friend in that deal too. This story comes to us from Satisfaction Tall 1572. Greedy owner tries to rip off my friend, ends up paying him double. My first job out of college was for a local TV station. The owner was, and still is, the worst human being I've ever met. This guy has money, but he will cheat and lie, anything to get out of paying his bills. When I started working there, the owner had just signed a contract with DirecTV to become part of their broadcast package. Since they were at the time purely a local TV station, this meant that we had about 2 months to upgrade our system, so that we can start broadcasting to DirecTV customers in the entire Bay Area. Every day that we failed to do this past the deadline means that the owner would suffer a penalty per the contract. Not knowing about how any of this works, the owner hired a friend of mine to come in as a freelance consultant. My friend told him that for about $15,000 US, he can get a system that will automate the entire process, which of course, this guy didn't want to pay. He tasked my friend with finding a cheaper way, around half, and to pay for all the hardware up front and get reimbursed later. Knowing what a piece of crap this guy is, I warned my friend not to front the money, because he wouldn't get paid back. The guy just smiled and said, "Watch me." So he made it work. We went live on schedule and the owner was happy. Then my friend went in and presented the guy with the bill. Immediately, the usual excuses start. "Oh, I'm a little short this month. Can I pay you later?" etc, etc. Then my friend pulled out the trump card. Not only did my friend threaten to take all of the equipment back and take the station off the air, he reveals that in order to get the uplink working for cheap, someone had to come in every day and code the broadcast manually. It's not a terribly complicated procedure, takes less than 5 minutes, but of course, no one else at the station knows how to do it but him. So either the owner can pay him what he's owed, plus a $2,000 a month consulting fee, or the station goes dark and he starts paying the penalty to DirecTV. The effer paid fast. So instead of $15,000, he ended up shelling out more than double that amount as my friend lapped up his $2,000 a month fee for close to a year before he felt bad and finally taught someone there how to do it. Moral of the story, only thinking about short-term gain will always cost you more in the long run. Jumping down to the comment section in this one, there's one from a user called STNMTN. It says, "Too bad he didn't teach you how to code the broadcast. Easy money." OP responded to this comment and said, "Nah, I left after 3 months. Couldn't take it anymore. What with the crappy salary and all the BS. Just a few things that I've been through there. 1, the guy refused to do direct deposit, so you would have to make an appointment with him every month to get your check. He would make a point of not showing up to work on payday, and there's nothing you can do. 2, my first paycheck was $300 short. When I asked why, he looked me straight in the eyes and tried to gaslight me. Oh, it's what we had agreed on, don't you remember? 3, my first day, I saw a bunch of people in suits walking around with clipboards. Another staff member told me that the building owner is trying to evict us because we haven't paid rent in 3 months. This is actually the owner's favorite MO. He would enter into a contract, not pay, and demand to negotiate for a cheaper price when the other side threatened to sue. His wife is a lawyer, so he's happy to go to court and drag things out. 4, when I first came on, he had just hired 15 news anchors, all young girls desperate to be on TV. Why does a local station need that many news anchors? Well, he would pay them the minimum wage, put them to work selling ads on the phone, then make a move on them. Those that agreed got to go on air, those that don't usually quit. After just a couple of weeks, they were dropping like flies, and the few that actually got to go on air, we knew what was up. 5, the first week he took everyone out to dinner on him. I thought it was awfully generous until I realized all the restaurant staff were giving us the stink eye. It turned out that this is another one of his scams. If you are a local business buying airtime on his channel, he would deliberately run the ads for longer than stipulated in the contract, then send you a bill and threaten to sue. You can either pay him, go to court, or give him free services, which is what was happening. I've never been more afraid of someone spitting into my food. OP added in a second comment more crazy stuff. 6, the other editor on staff was homeless. His wife had kicked him out. He gets paid minimum wage in exchange for being allowed to sleep in the studio. 7, owner had a blue screen installed but was too cheap to buy the real-time chroma key hardware, so for 2 months, we would just go live with an all-blue background. 8, the owner would go to Vietnam. We were a Vietnamese language station. Buys a bunch of DVDs of TV shows and movies there, then rips the contents and rebroadcast. The problem with doing this in the US is that the local Viet community is hypersensitive to anything that references the communist Vietnamese government, such as the national flag, the police, etc. So an editor, the homeless guy, was assigned to edit out those things. I would frequently walk in to find him asleep at his desk, so every week something would inevitably slip through and all heck would break loose. People would call the station and yell at us, picket lines would form outside, and we would have these screaming matches where everyone is trying to shift blames. Yep, that station owner just sounds like another person who doesn't quite understand the concept of you get what you pay for. The freelance consultant in this case did the absolute right thing though, putting in a failsafe and basically forcing the station owner to pay them $2,000 a month in a consulting fee. That guy is absolutely brilliant. And speaking of brilliance, well, the station owner didn't have any of that because they paid twice what they needed to. I would call that an idiot tax. This story comes to us from Lucario Stormblade. Try to steal my legally rented parking spot? Enjoy being unemployed. This happened last night. I am now in a good enough spot to actually post this. I'm not quite sure if it qualifies as pro, but it definitely isn't petty. I am a professional driver. As such, on the roads in the US, there are different truck stops throughout the country that has a pay-to-park system, usually about 10 to 20% of the lot, marked off as reserved, with each space running from $15 to $25. The truck stop where this took place had parking for $17, which is relatively cheap for a guaranteed spot. The spots are reserved for 24 hours, starting at 4 p.m. local time, and extending to 3 p.m. the following afternoon. I knew that I would have a late night delivery, so I came to the truck stop around 3:30 and paid for a reserved spot. I told the manager on duty that I had a delivery up the road that night and would be back once the delivery was completed, but should still be able to clear out the spot by the next afternoon today. She told me that this was okay and she would mark the spot as sold when I left. That way, if someone else comes in trying to reserve that spot, she could consult her notes and deny the sale. 11:15 p.m. rolls around. I take off for my delivery. I don't get out of that facility until 2:30 a.m. the next morning, this morning. So I groggily drive back to the truck stop to reclaim my paid-for spot, only to find out that the reserved parking spaces are all full. I call the manager on duty and after giving her my info, inform her that all the spots are full and that someone has parked in a spot and hasn't paid for it. She sends her other employee out to start checking trucks. The culprit was from a company that is known for their bright orange trailers, and he was a company driver. The other employee starts banging on his door to inform him that he is parked illegally and he has to move. Meanwhile, I can see the commotion from my mirror with my vantage point in the fuel island, where I had been instructed to temporarily park. The driver answers the door with a bottle of Heineken in one hand and some sort of smoking implement in another. I know what it is, but for the sake of the mods here, I'm not going to say it. I decided to roll down the window to hear the commotion, and I hear the employee tell the driver to either move or he will get the towing company and police involved. This driver is flat out irate that someone had the audacity to tell him where he can and cannot park. So he slams the door on the employee, threatening him. Employee calls the police and tow company, and the police show up first. I had worked for this company before, so I know their policies and more importantly, what they can and cannot have in their trucks. Alcoholic beverages are not allowed in the cab. Anything that isn't a cigarette or a cigar and a lighter, also not allowed. The coup de grace, a pew-pew of any kind, absolutely not allowed, and especially not allowed loaded. This driver had all that, and some other not-so-legal substances in his cab, so he was hauled away in cuffs. His truck was hauled away on a wrecker. I made a call after the commotion died down to the company safety director and informed them that their rig will be in an impound lot and their driver is going to jail over the not-so-legal stuff he had in his truck. She thanked me and said that he will definitely lose his job, especially over the alcohol and the other not-so-legal stuff. I guess he played the screw around and find out card, and it bit him in his career. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called DoMap4190. It says, "It bit him in his career. That's the line of the day." Guy was basically asking to get the cops involved. Alcohol must not have any effect on him. Well done. OP responded to this comment and said, "Reminds me of a quote I heard from a comedian. Some people can handle their alcohol. You know who you are. Some people cannot. They have no clue." You know, OP, I know you got a little bit inconvenienced, but I do have to say that this other guy, he kinda got what he wished for, because he's never gonna have to pay for truck parking ever again. Tying this into my local area here in Ontario, about 10 minutes up the 401 from me, there's a truck stop called the 10 Acre Truck Stop. They at one point decided they were gonna charge people to use their lot. And when you drove by there was only a couple of trucks in there every night. But the new owners that have it now decided that they weren't going to charge trucks to use the lot. They have 10 acres, they can fit in a ton of trucks, and now that place is packed every single night. The best part about that, they have a restaurant on site with showers and everything those truckers need. Do you think that business is doing better now with all those truckers in the lot? Or before when they were charging for parking and only had a couple in there overnight? That's a no-brainer. Check out all 3 OPs linked in the description down below. Make sure you also comment down below and let me know what you think of KCC's new format. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and we'll see you tomorrow.